Keep her sleeping.
Quiet. Careful.
I got it. Let's go.
Touch her again, and this kitchen becomes your grave, Lorenzo Vitale whispered so softly the copper pot seemed to stop ringing. His head chef froze with one hand above the plus-size cook sleeping at the marble prep table, still wearing a flour-dusted apron, her cheek resting beside an untouched cup of coffee. Everyone in the underground kitchen had laughed when Rose Bennett finally collapsed from exhaustion after saving a banquet no one thanked her for. Lorenzo did not laugh. He removed his midnight coat, covered her broad shoulders, and told every witness to forget what they had seen. Some women are hidden because they are weak. Rose was hidden because she had already saved the king. Rose Bennett had cooked for dangerous men for 3 years, but that night, one secret recipe placed her between 2 mafia families and a funeral, disguised as dinner. She was beautifully plus-size, soft and strong, a woman of glorious substance who had learned to carry heat knives, insults and hunger without asking permission to exist. Lorenzo Vitale, the most feared crime boss in New Orleans, found her asleep after midnight and covered her like a treasure no one was allowed to disturb. By dawn, he would discover why she had been awake for 22 hours, why 3 silver-tasting spoons were hidden in her apron, and why the rival boss's wine smelled faintly of bitter almonds. The Vitale mansion sat behind iron gates at the edge of the garden district, all white columns, black balconies, magnolia trees and secrets, buried deeper than the wine cellar. Above ground, guests saw chandeliers, velvet chairs, oil paintings and polished silver. Below ground, the kitchen burned like a furnace full of steam, garlic, citrus butter, copper pans, and frightened staff, trying to feed men who settled arguments with quiet smiles. Rose Bennett stood at the center of that heat in navy kitchen whites, altered to fit her lush, generous curves. She did not glide like the slim pastry girls, and she did not apologize for that. She planted her feet, lifted stockpots, tasted sauces, and made food obey. At 29, Rose was only a staff cook, not the executive chef, not the face of the kitchen, not the person donors praised after charity dinners. Yet everyone who worked below the mansion knew the truth. The gumbo only balanced when Rose touched it. The osso buco only softened when Rose watched the braise. The lemon custard only shivered correctly under her spoon. She carried her curves with quiet confidence, not because the world had praised her body, but because kitchens punished hesitation faster than cruelty ever could. Her hands were quick, her memory was sharper than invoices, and her palate had once earned a Michelin chef's private jealousy. Rose could taste fear in oversalted soup. She could taste lies in wine. That gift had come from her father, a military field cook who treated flavor like evidence. Henry Bennett had taught soldiers to identify spoiled water, contaminated rations, and drugged liquor before enemies reached them by bullet. When Rose was 12, he blindfolded her at their tiny kitchen table and made her name 20 spices by smell alone. When she was 16, he taught her which herbs healed and which killed slowly if hidden under sugar. Before he died, he made her promise never to sell that knowledge to violent men. Rose kept the promise badly. The Vitale kitchen paid for her mother's care, her rent, and the debt her ex-husband had left behind like mold inside the walls. That ex-husband, Carter Hale, now stood near the service elevator wearing a white chef coat he had not earned, smiling as if the world still owed him applause. He had been hired that week as a consultant for the peace dinner between the Vitales and the Bella Rosa family, a night meant to end 18 months of bloodless but expensive war over docks, casinos, and judges. Rose had begged the house manager not to assign Carter beside her. Nobody listened. Carter knew her old wounds. He knew she had once dreamed of opening a bakery with him. He knew exactly where to cut without leaving marks. "Careful, Rose," he murmured, as she lifted a tray. "Tables can only hold so much weight." 2 prep cooks heard him. One snorted. Another pretended to check parsley cheeks pink with cowardice. Rose felt the words land against the softness of her stomach, the roundness of her hips, the body Carter had praised when he wanted comfort and mocked when he wanted power. She did not answer. The kitchen was too full, too dangerous, too near service. Steam fogged the mirrors. Knives flashed. Outside the swinging doors, Mafia royalty drank champagne beneath chandeliers while pretending dinner was not another battlefield. Rose checked the sauce again, forcing her throat to swallow shame and not tears. Professionalism had become her armor long before anyone offered her respect. Carter leaned closer while the executive chef Marcel Duval shouted for plating. Still, quiet. That was always your problem. All that body, no backbone. Rose's hand tightened around the tasting spoon until silver bit her palm. Across the room, Bianca Vitale, Lorenzo's cousin and self-appointed queen of the household, entered in emerald silk, wrinkling her perfect nose at the smell of frying shallots. "Is this the cook who fell asleep during last year's fundraiser?" she asked loudly. The big one laughed and moved through the staff like a dirty breeze. Rose stared into the copper saucepan. In the reflection, her face looked calm. Inside, something old and tired folded in half. Then the kitchen door opened without sound, and every laugh died. Lorenzo Vitale entered in a masterfully tailored obsidian suit, broad shoulders filling the doorway, his jawline sharp enough to cut through marble. He did not raise his voice. He did not have to. Men like Lorenzo made silence stand at attention. His dark, predatory eyes moved over the kitchen, past the cooks, past Carter, past Bianca, and stopped on Rose's hand clenched around the spoon. He had heard something. Rose felt it with the same instinct that told her when butter was 2 seconds from burning. But Lorenzo said nothing. He only asked in a gravelly baritone, "Is my dinner ready?" Marcel bowed his head too quickly. "Almost Don Vitale. Miss Bennett is handling final seasoning." Bianca smiled with polished venom. "She handles seasoning because no one trusts her near presentation. We all have gifts." Lorenzo's gaze shifted to his cousin. The air dropped 10 degrees. "Do we?" he murmured. Bianca's smile weakened. Carter looked at the floor, but Rose saw the flash of satisfaction in his eyes. He wanted Lorenzo to notice her as a joke, as kitchen furniture, as the heavy cook too exhausted to matter. Instead, Lorenzo looked at the untouched tasting spoons lined near Rose's board, then at the separate wine reduction simmering in a small pan no one had requested. His eyes narrowed. He noticed too much. Service began before anyone could breathe again. Plates moved upstairs like offerings to wolves. Veal roasted figs, black garlic potatoes, oysters under lemon foam, and a blood-orange sorbet meant to cleanse the palate between enemies. Rose worked until her back ached, and her feet burned inside clogs. She tasted each sauce twice. The Bellarosa wine arrived uncorked from a private case, which was wrong. The cork smelled faintly metallic, which was worse. Rose poured a single drop into a spoon, touched it to her tongue and felt cold crawl behind her teeth. Bitter almond, not enough to scream, poison enough to hide inside expensive oak and older grudges. Her father's voice rose in memory. Never accuse without proof. Never swallow twice. She moved fast. Not dramatically, not foolishly. She marked the Bellarosa glasses with invisible lemon oil, switched Lorenzo's pour for cellar reserve, and sent a busboy to fetch fresh decanters under the excuse of sediment. Then she made herself taste the sauce Carter had been stirring while speaking too sweetly to Bianca. There it was again, not almond this time, but foxglove bitterness buried beneath rosemary and reduced wine. Rose's pulse slowed instead of racing. Kitchen's punished panic. She scraped a sample into 3 tasting spoons, wrapped them in a napkin and tucked them into her apron. She did not know who had ordered the poison. She only knew Lorenzo Vitale was seconds from eating it. Rose carried the replacement sauce upstairs herself. The dining room glittered with danger. Lorenzo sat at the head of the table, dark and still beneath a chandelier dripping crystals like frozen tears. Across from him, Salvatore Bellarosa smiled through old hatred. Bianca sat beside a visiting senator, bored and beautiful. Carter stood near the sideboard, pretending consultant work required watching Rose's every step. Conversations faded as she entered. Not because she was powerful, but because she did not belong. A cook in navy whites. A plus-size woman with flour on one sleeve and sweat at her hairline. Carter's mouth curved. Lost Rosie. "The dessert table is downstairs." "Or did you smell leftovers?" The senator laughed first. Others followed. The sound pressed against Rose's ribs, but she kept walking. Lorenzo's eyes turned lethal, yet he still did not move. Maybe he understood that interruption would make her smaller before the room. Maybe he was waiting to see whether she had come for shame or war. Rose placed the clean sauce at his left hand and removed the poisoned one with steady fingers. Chef Duval requested an adjustment, she said. Carter stepped forward. No, he did not. The table quieted. Rose met Carter's eyes and saw panic beneath arrogance. Bianca leaned back, smiling. Perhaps Miss Bennet is hungry and confused. Long hours must be hard on a woman carrying so much extra. Rose inhaled once. Bitter almond clung to the air. So did betrayal. Lorenzo rose slowly. The room did not merely quiet, it surrendered. Crystals stopped chiming. Forks paused above plates. Even Salvatore Bellarosa's smile dulled. Lorenzo moved to Rose's side with the silent grace of an apex predator, close enough that his dark cologne wrapped around her like cedar smoke and winter rain. He did not touch her. He only looked at Carter. Explain why my cook is removing my sauce. Carter opened his mouth, found no answer, and reached for contempt because fear gave him nothing else. Because she is dramatic. Rose always needed attention. Give her a pantry and a man with power, and suddenly the big girl imagines herself important. Rose expected laughter. None came. Lorenzo turned his head toward her, and his expression changed from cold power to something quieter and infinitely more dangerous. Did you imagine this? He asked. Rose removed the napkin from her apron and laid the 3 tasting spoons beside his plate. No, she replied. I tasted it. Salvatore's men shifted. Bianca went very still. Carter swallowed. Lorenzo did not ask how. He did not question the cook over the man. He lifted 1 spoon, smelled it, then passed it to his consigliere Enzo, who appeared from the wall like a shadow made flesh. Enzo dipped a testing strip into the sauce. Purple spread across the paper. The dining room became a held breath. Foxglove, Enzo murmured. Enough to stop a heart if the dose continued through 3 courses. Lorenzo looked at Carter. For the first time that night, Carter's face emptied of charm. Salvatore Bellarosa shoved back his chair. That did not come from us. Bianca's hand tightened around her wineglass. Rose saw it. Lorenzo saw Rose seeing it. That was the second secret. Bianca had not been laughing because she enjoyed cruelty. She had been watching whether Rose would reach the table in time. Lorenzo's voice dropped into a low, lethal purr. Everyone remained seated. No one argued. He looked at Rose again. You saved my life. Carter snapped. She guessed. Rose's exhaustion cracked open just enough for 1 sentence. I do not guess in kitchens. I measure. Enzo took the spoons, the wine, and the sauce away. Lorenzo ordered the dinner continued with fresh plates, which sounded insane until Rose understood the strategy. A panic would let the guilty run. A controlled room forced them to sweat. She returned downstairs on legs that felt carved from salt. The kitchen had already heard enough whispers to become unbearable. Marcel stared at her like she had carried a bomb through his dining room. Carter followed minutes later, pale and furious. You think he cares? He hissed near the pantry. You are a cook. A big, lonely cook who got lucky with 1 bad spoon. Rose reached for a clean towel, but the room blurred. 22 hours awake. No dinner. Too much adrenaline. Her knees almost folded. She made it to the staff table near the dry storage shelves, sat down to write labels for the preserved samples, and woke to darkness, candle smoke, and weight across her shoulders. For 1 terrifying second, Rose thought she had been locked inside the kitchen alone. Then she saw Lorenzo standing beside the table, 1 hand braced on the chair opposite her. His obsidian coat draped over her body like a private flag. His shirt sleeves were rolled back. His tie was gone. The mansion above had gone quiet. Rose tried to sit up, humiliation burning hotter than the ovens. I am sorry. I did not mean to sleep. Lorenzo's eyes softened by a single dangerous degree. Do not apologize for surviving exhaustion. Behind him, Marcel, Carter, Bianca, and 3 guards stood frozen near the service corridor. Rose understood at once. They had found her sleeping and had nearly made it another joke. Carter's hand still hovered in the air, as if he had been about to shake her awake roughly before Lorenzo entered. Lorenzo looked back at him. Touch her again, and this kitchen becomes your grave. Carter's face drained of blood. Bianca whispered, Lorenzo, she is staff. Lorenzo did not raise his voice. She is the reason I am alive. You are the reason I am disappointed. Bianca recoiled, as if slapped. Rose clutched the coat around herself, smelling cedarwood and cold night air. No one had covered her since her father died. Everyone out, Lorenzo ordered. Marcel fled first. Carter obeyed because fear finally outweighed pride. Bianca lingered only until Lorenzo's gaze found her again. When the door closed, Rose sat wrapped in his coat, too ashamed to look at him, and too warmed to remove it. I should have stayed awake, she whispered. You stayed awake long enough to stop a murder. He pulled out the chair opposite her and sat, making the staff table look suddenly royal. Under the low kitchen lights, his face was more brutal and more tired than it had seemed upstairs. Tell me how you knew. Rose laughed softly without humor. People usually ask who helped me before they ask how I did it. Lorenzo's jaw tightened. I am not people. So she told him pieces. Her father, the blindfolded spices, the lessons about bitter almond, foxglove, oleander sedatives, and men who preferred poison because it looked like fate. She did not tell him everything. Not yet. She did not tell him her father had once cooked for a government unit that tracked syndicate poisoners, or that one of his old notebooks still sat under her mattress. Lorenzo listened without interruption, his large calloused hand resting near hers, but not touching. The distance felt deliberate, respectful, dangerous. Carter knew about this gift, he asked. Rose shook her head. Carter knew I was useful. He never cared why. Lorenzo's mouth curved without warmth. Then he was poorer than I thought. Rose looked down. Please do not kill him. The words surprised them both. Lorenzo leaned back, predatory calm returning to his eyes. He tried to humiliate you. That is not a death sentence. In my house after tonight it is close. Rose finally met his gaze. I saved you from poison, not from morality. Silence stretched between them, thick with garlic, extinguished candles, and something stranger than fear. Lorenzo studied her as if she had become a language he needed to learn before dawn. You speak to me like I am not dangerous. I speak to you like you are injured by power and pretending it is armor. His expression went utterly still. Most people probably did not survive that sentence comfortably. Rose almost apologized. Then Lorenzo smiled, small and dark. You are very tired, little chef. Do not call me little, Rose replied. His smile widened by a fraction. No, you are right. There is nothing little about you. Heat moved up her throat, but his eyes held no mockery. They moved over her soft, round figure, with something that felt closer to reverence than appetite, as if the fullness she carried had been translated into strength before he ever spoke. You are a woman of glorious substance, he murmured. A kitchen should kneel when you enter it. Rose's breath caught. Compliments usually arrived from men like Carter wrapped around a hook. This one came like a confession. She pushed his coat back. You should not say things like that to staff. Lorenzo stood, took the coat and placed it gently around her again. Then stop being merely staff. By morning, the Vitali mansion had changed shape around Rose. Guards who once ignored her now opened doors. Prep cooks stopped gossiping when she entered. Marcel lowered his voice around her knives. Carter was gone from the kitchen schedule, officially dismissed for misconduct, unofficially held somewhere while Enzo asked questions Rose did not want described. Bianca avoided breakfast, which told Rose more than any confession. Lorenzo did not summon Rose upstairs. He sent coffee, warm bread, and a note written in sharp black ink. Eat before saving anyone else. She should have thrown it away. Instead, she folded it once and tucked it into the pocket of her apron, hating the small foolish part of herself that warmed each time she brushed against the paper. The peace dinner scandal could not be hidden completely. By noon, rumors moved through New Orleans society with perfume and claws. Someone had tried to poison Lorenzo Vitali. The fat cook had caught it. Bianca had looked pale. Carter Hale had vanished. Every version made Rose bigger or smaller depending on the teller's cruelty. At 3, Bianca cornered her in the herb garden behind the kitchen where basil, thyme, and rosemary grew in terracotta pots beneath wet magnolia leaves. "You must be enjoying this," Bianca said, sunglasses hiding her eyes. Rose held a basket of parsley and did not bow. "Enjoying what pretending Lorenzo sees you as more than a useful kitchen animal." The old wound opened. Rose kept her voice steady. "Useful is more than decorative." Bianca's smile trembled with anger. "You think you understand him because he covered you with a coat. Lorenzo protects assets. He does not love them." Rose looked at the rosemary in her hand and suddenly smelled the sauce again. Foxglove beneath herbs. Bianca wore the same perfume from the dining room, orange blossom smoke and something medicinal. Rose's fingers tightened around the basket. "Did you know which course would kill him?" she asked quietly. Bianca's chin lifted. "Careful." That was enough. Not proof, but enough to confirm the shape of the secret. Bianca was not merely cruel, she was desperate. Rose stepped closer. "If you helped poison him, you should be more frightened of me than of Lorenzo." Bianca laughed once. "You, Rose," held her gaze. "I know how slow poisons work." That evening, Lorenzo found Rose in the locked pantry, cataloguing every herb jar, wine bottle, vinegar, and spice tin used during the dinner. "You should have told me Bianca threatened you." Rose did not turn around. "You should have told me Carter had gambling debts to Bellarosa bookkeepers." Lorenzo went silent. "Enzo talks to the kitchen girls," Rose explained. "The kitchen girls talk to me." Lorenzo stepped inside and closed the door, filling the small room with cedarwood wool and controlled danger. "You are investigating my family in a pantry. Someone used my kitchen as a weapon. That makes it mine." He looked at the labels she had written. The samples arranged by course, the careful timeline marked on butcher paper. His expression shifted from irritation to awe. "You built a case?" "No," Rose replied. "I built a menu backwards." The truth emerged in flavors. The poisoned sauce had been touched after Carter stirred it, but before Rose tasted it. The wine case had been opened by a household key, not a Bellarosa servant. The foxglove had not come from dried herb stock. It came from Bianca's ornamental greenhouse, where digitalis bloomed in pink bells behind locked glass. Carter had debt motive and stupidity, but Bianca had access and hatred. Rose mapped it all while Lorenzo watched. "Why would your cousin want you dead?" she asked. His eyes darkened. "Because my father promised her branch of the family control if I failed to produce an heir or died without naming a successor." Rose absorbed that, and the Bellarosa peace dinner gave her a perfect enemy to blame. Lorenzo's mouth tightened. Yes. Then Carter was bait. Carter was disposable. Before Rose could answer, the pantry door shook with a crash from the kitchen. Voices shouted. A guard cursed. Smoke hissed under the gap, carrying the sharp scent of burning sugar and alcohol. Lorenzo reached for the door, but Rose grabbed his sleeve. "Wait." He looked at her hand, then at her face. "Fire. Not kitchen fire," she whispered. "Rum, sugar, and clove. Distraction smoke." Her father had used the same scent when teaching her how saboteurs hid movement. Another crash sounded near the service hallway. Someone wanted them to flee through the obvious exit. Rose turned to the dumbwaiter shaft beside the pantry shelves. "There is an old wine lift behind those crates. It opens near the courtyard." Lorenzo stared. "You know my house better than my guards. I know kitchens." They moved through the shaft in darkness, Rose first because she was the only one who knew where the rusted latch stuck. Her body, so often dismissed in narrow rooms, became strength in the old passage. She braced her knees against wood, pushed with her shoulder, and forced the jammed panel open without panicking. Lorenzo followed too broad for the shaft, cursing softly in Italian. In the courtyard, two masked men waited near the kitchen exit, weapons pointed at smoke and confusion. They did not see Rose emerge behind the lemon trees. She lifted a cast-iron planter with both hands and dropped it against the stone path. The crack turned their heads. Lorenzo moved like night itself. The fight ended before it became spectacle. When guards flooded the courtyard, Rose stood barefoot in flour-dusted clogs, palms scraped from the lift, breathing hard beneath moonlit magnolias. Lorenzo turned toward her, fury and fear battling openly across his face. "You could have been hurt." Rose laughed, shaken and sharp. "You could try saying thank you before scolding me." Enzo dragged one attacker forward. Under the mask, the man was Carter. His cheek was bruised, his eyes wild, his courage rented from desperation. "She made me," he gasped. "Bianca said if I helped, she would clear my debt. She said Rose would be blamed because everyone already thought she was clumsy and emotional." Rose felt the words hit, but not destroy. Lorenzo's voice went quiet enough to freeze blood. "Bring Bianca to the dining room. Alive. Unmarked. Conscious." Bianca arrived 20 minutes later in ivory silk hair, perfect hands shaking. The dining room had been reset not for dinner this time, but judgment. Lorenzo sat at the head of the table. Enzo stood beside Carter. Guards lined the walls. Rose expected to be sent back to the kitchen. Instead, Lorenzo pulled out the chair at his right hand and waited. Every person in the room saw it. Bianca's mouth parted. Carter stared. Rose sat because refusing would make his respect into theater, and accepting made it fact. Lorenzo looked at his cousin. "Explain." Bianca tried tears first, then outrage, then family loyalty. None survived the evidence Rose placed on the table: the herb timeline, the wine key record, the digitalis petals trapped in wax paper, and Carter's recorded confession. "You let a cook build this," Bianca spat, losing elegance by degrees. "A sleeping cook, a woman who barely fits through service doors. The insult should have hurt. It did, but differently now, like an old bruise pressed through armor." Lorenzo began to rise, but Rose touched his wrist. "No," she murmured. Then she looked at Bianca. "I fell asleep because I stayed awake, saving the man you tried to murder. I fit through every door that mattered. The pantry, the wine lift, your lie." Silence fell hard. Enzo's mouth twitched. Carter looked at the floor. Bianca's face crumpled not from remorse but from the horror of being defeated by the woman she had considered beneath furniture. Rose felt absolutely nothing but pity. Bianca's fall came in layers. First, safety vanished. Her guards were reassigned before sunrise, her phone taken, her driver dismissed. Then power cracked. Lorenzo called the family council and removed her branch from succession documents, while lawyers listened in silence. Then money followed. Accounts tied to her greenhouse charities and shell foundations froze under evidence of laundering Bellarosa funds. Finally came loneliness. The senator who had held her hand at dinner denied knowing her beyond public events. Friends stopped answering. By afternoon, Bianca sat in a locked sitting room with untouched tea, no silk mask strong enough to hide panic. Rose watched none of it directly. She learned through whispers, through staff carrying trays, through the way the mansion exhaled after a poisonous flower was cut from its garden. Carter's collapse was uglier because it was smaller. He had built his cruelty on borrowed money, borrowed titles, and borrowed confidence. When Bianca's protection disappeared, debt collectors wanted him. Bellarosa men wanted explanations, and Vitali lawyers wanted signed testimony. Lorenzo offered him one narrow path: confess publicly to his role in the kitchen sabotage and leave New Orleans under federal protection with nothing but shame. Carter begged to see Rose. Lorenzo asked her first. That mattered. She agreed in the cold bakery room where extra bread cooled on wire racks. Carter arrived, pale hands cuffed in front eyes darting toward Lorenzo's shadow beyond the glass. "Rosie," he whispered. Rose interrupted gently. "You do not get to use the name you bruised." He cried then, not beautifully, not with growth, but with the panic of a man who had finally met consequences bigger than his charm. "I was angry because you were better than me," he admitted. "You always were. I knew it before we married. I thought if I made you feel heavy, you would not notice I was hollow." Rose folded her hands over her apron, feeling the old years loosen one thread at a time. "You almost helped kill a man. I did not know the dose. You knew enough to hide it." Carter looked down. "Please tell Lorenzo I helped." Rose studied him and felt the final hook slide free from her heart. "No, you will tell the truth because it is the only useful thing left in you." That night, Rose returned to her apartment above a closed corner bakery, expecting silence, unpaid bills, and the damp loneliness of rooms that knew too many double shifts. Instead, a black car waited below and Enzo stood beside it holding a deep crimson garment bag. "Don Vitale asks for dinner," he said. Rose frowned. Don Vitale can ask with his own mouth. Enzo looked amused, despite himself, and handed her a cream envelope. Inside was Lorenzo's note. "You were right. Commands are not respect. Will you have dinner with me tonight, Rose Bennett? Wear this only if you choose." She read the last 4 words twice. "Only if you choose." Her chest tightened in a place no insult had reached for years. Inside the bag was a ruby dress made of heavy silk structured through the bodice, soft at the sleeves, cut to celebrate her lush curves instead of hiding them. Rose almost laughed at the audacity. Then she touched the fabric and realized it was not small, not altered from someone else's dream, not apologetic. It was made for her exact body. Her magnificent slope of hips, her generous figure, her waist, her softness, her power. For once, clothing did not feel like a negotiation. She showered, pinned her curls and wore the dress because she wanted to see what happened when she stopped choosing navy shadows. At 8, she stepped into the black car and the city lights opened before her like a dangerous invitation. Dinner waited on the mansion rooftop far above the kitchen heat. Lanterns glowed among lemon trees in silver planters. The Mississippi moved dark beyond the balconies. A small table held crawfish beignets, roasted duck with cherry glaze, corn pudding, charred okra honey figs, and a chocolate torte dusted with espresso. Lorenzo stood when Rose arrived. He wore a masterfully tailored midnight blue suit, but for once the suit seemed less powerful than the way he looked at her. Reverence stripped his face bare. "You came," he murmured. "You asked," she replied. His mouth curved. "I am learning." Slowly, painfully. She almost smiled. He offered his hand, palm up, not an order, not a claim. She placed her hand in his because choice changed everything. They ate without guards, close enough to hear. Lorenzo asked about her father, her first kitchen, her mother's favorite soup, and the bakery she had once wanted. Rose answered carefully at first, then more freely when he listened, as if every word mattered more than empire business. He told her about inheriting the Vitale family after his brother died, about learning suspicion before tenderness, about mistaking control for safety until she argued morality with him at a staff table. "You could reopen the bakery," he said. Rose shook her head. "Do not buy me a dream like jewelry. Then let me invest in a business plan you control." She looked at him sharply. He did not flinch. "Not a gift," he added. "A partnership. With contracts, your lawyer writes." Before she could answer, Enzo appeared at the rooftop entrance. "Bianca is ready." Rose's shoulders tightened. Lorenzo saw it. "You do not have to see her." "Yes," Rose said softly. "I do." Bianca entered without jewelry, without sunglasses, without the glossy armor that had once made her untouchable. 2 guards stayed behind her. She looked at Rose in crimson silk and understood the reversal without anyone explaining it. "I suppose you want me to beg," Bianca whispered. Rose set down her napkin. "No. I want to know why." Bianca laughed bitterly. "Because men like Lorenzo inherit everything. Women like me are told to smile beside power, never hold it. Then, you came from the kitchen, and he listened to you in one night more than he listened to me in 10 years. For the first time, Rose saw the wound beneath Bianca's cruelty. It did not excuse the poison. It explained the rot. "You could have asked for power," Rose said. "I did." Bianca's eyes filled with hatred and grief. "They called me emotional, ambitious, difficult." Rose nodded slowly. "So you chose to become exactly what they feared." Bianca looked away. Lorenzo remained silent, letting Rose shape the moment. That silence meant more than any declaration. Rose stood, crimson silk moving around her like flame. "You will testify. You will return what you stole. You will never use another woman's body or position to make yourself feel tall again." Bianca's mouth trembled. "And if I refuse?" Rose glanced toward the kitchen stairs, then back. "Then every flower in your garden becomes evidence." When Bianca was led away, the rooftop felt wider. Lorenzo approached Rose, slowly stopping just outside reach. You gave her more mercy than I would have. That is because I still know how to feed people without owning them. His eyes softened, and I am trying to learn how to love without owning. The word love moved through the lantern light, quiet and irreversible. Rose looked out over the city at the river, carrying reflections like broken gold. Are you afraid of me? Lorenzo asked. Voice rougher now. Rose turned back. No. His breath left him like a man spared execution. Are you afraid of what I am? She considered the question honestly. Sometimes, but I am more afraid of becoming someone who accepts less than respect, because protection feels warm. Lorenzo stepped closer, his large, calloused hand lifting slowly until Rose could refuse it. She did not. His fingers touched her cheek with impossible gentleness. Then, hear me, clearly, he whispered. You are not my cook, my secret, my debt, or my possession. You are the woman who saved my life, challenged my judgment, and taught my house the difference between service and power. You are lush and soft and perfect, Rose Bennett, a queen with flower on her sleeve. From this night forward, anyone who makes you feel less than magnificent will face the fire, including the man I used to be. Her eyes burned. That is a dangerous promise. You are a dangerous woman. I am a tired woman. Then let me cover you when you sleep. The kiss came slowly, not stolen across a table or demanded under chandeliers, but offered beneath lanterns while the kitchen below cooled from a long night of war. Rose rose into it by choice, her hands closing over the lapels of his midnight suit, her body unhidden, unashamed, and steady against his. Lorenzo held her, like reverence had finally become muscle memory. Somewhere below them, copper pans hung silent knives, rested clean, and a staff table waited beneath low light, where a tired cook had once fallen asleep after saving a king. He had covered her and told no one. Now the whole empire knew. Some women are hidden because men are blind. Rose Bennett was seen, and the house would never forget. Did you love seeing Rose rise from exhausted plus-size cook to the woman who saved a Mafia empire with nothing but her palate, courage, and truth? Hit that like button, share this story, and subscribe for more. Drop a comment below telling us whether Lorenzo deserved Rose's trust after the way his house treated her. And tell us this, if you were Rose, would you forgive the man who covered you in silence? Or would you make him spend the rest of his life earning the right to stand beside your fire? Because in kitchens and kingdoms, real power is not always the hand holding the knife. Sometimes it is the woman who knows exactly what is hidden in the sauce.